Hello, we're in Malta. I'm going to go over two rather pleasing, beautiful, wonderful framed tablets. And these tablets are fashioned from a piece of timber, poplar perhaps, a fruitwood maybe. And the frames are reproduction Gothic, otherwise known as Neo-Gothic, New Gothic. But of course they're a reproduction in 1860, 70, 80. They're not modern at all. They are antique, but they are not first generation Gothic, and they are not the first edition Gothic, to use modern words. They are Victorian products, and within the range of antiques, some artworks are unique and one-offs, and sometimes not commercial. For example, people will paint for their family, they will paint for the church. And then there are other products which are commercial, solely commercial, and these are an example of a product. And again, to use modern language, this is the equivalent of a barcode. It's not a barcode because it's from 1860, 70, 80, 1890 possibly, but it has a trade label on it. And these are products. Yes, they're artworks. Yes, they're beautiful. They're antique, but they're products. And the driving force for these Fra Angelico tablets with the Neo-Gothic frame, the driving force was the tourist trade to Florence in the 19th century. And the tourists would want to buy a memento and would go into the shops in Florence and the stalls, and they would buy these objects, these artifacts, and they would have been new in the Victorian era, but they would have been versions of earlier Gothic artworks. So fundamentally you have Fra Angelico paintings, copies of paintings on wood, showing the angels playing musical instruments. And in this case you have it's a trumpet, and this one is facing that way. This is another one, another angel, got the wings, the trumpet's facing that way. They have got sgraffito, sunbursts and punchwork halos, and the painting is painting done by brush onto a gold leaf surface. These are not the paper ones stuck on like you can get now, and did start to appear in the Victorian era. These are proper things, and they're painted onto these tablets, which were independently made from the frame. And what would have happened in Florence is there would have been a quarter where these things were for sale, and a shop or a artist would have a pile of these. There would be 20 or 30 different saints, different angels, and the buyer would pick the ones they liked, and they would get a frame to go with it. I don't think necessarily they were sold together. They might have been sold together, but they weren't made by the same people. There would have been someone making these frames nearby. It's like with the automobiles, you have one craftsman doing the windows, you have one craftsman doing the engines, and someone else doing the tyres, and it's the same thing with these. So in the area, in Florence, the tourist, the grand tourist if you like, could have bought some of these. Usually they were sold in pairs, and this is a good pair because the characters face each other, so they're an opposing pair. It looks right, but the frames are not quite a pair. The panel is different. That is a symmetrical emblem. This one is a non-symmetrical flower, and there are other differences. The cross is large here in this hole. The cross here is not so big, so they are slightly different. I think we could call them a pair, but they're not an exact pair. The sgraffito is different on the top, so they're a near pair, close pair. They have the columns intact, and they're near enough okay. You can't see it unless you get right up close. Some damage. This damage is pleasing damage. It's not detracting from it. They're made in components, like a Florentine mirror, and they're stuck together. So the Florentine idea is gold, and it's showy, ostentatious, a bit like the C&E school, and the artworks by Fra Angelico might have been hugely bigger than this, or there might have been murals. I haven't bothered to look them up, but from the early years, just coming out of the Middle Ages, that there was this Christian art, and these are these mementos, as we've discussed. I think they're very distinctive and really getting expensive now, but I think they're going to go up really quite a lot because there's so few left. The thing about the label is it helps us date them and helps us identify them. And this is labelled G.A. Schwicker Artists. 21 Piazza, I can't read it, Florence, and there's a wonderful paper label on the on that one, and there's two subsidiary labels as well. So we know it's sort of from a set. They probably could have come from a larger set, and you would have been able to pick different angels. Some of the angels have drums, tambourines, some have cymbals, and it was from a popular Angelico subject. I think that they are very interesting. The tablet, the lozenge, is loose. It's held by pins inside this wonderful frame. These, we have a number of sets of these. We have 3 sets at the moment and a couple of odd ones. And with the label, these are particularly interesting. Not many have labels in. And looking at the typeset on that label, I would actually say these are probably later than I'm suggesting. I think these are going to be 1890, possibly turn of the century. It's hard to say exactly because they didn't really change the design or the scale or the quality of the workmanship. They have got the top crests in situ, which is not always the case. They have the right sort of steeply pointy bits. They've got the trim where often the trim is damaged, and it is real gold leaf. It is water gilded gold leaf, and it's applied with some generosity. It's very thick, unusually thick, and they still, though they're dirty and grubby, they still are bright. And to clean these, you have to use oil. If you use water, it will ruin them. You have to use oil to clean them. So they're moderately sized. They're not tiny ones. They're not the biggest ones. They're a good pair. They're not for sale. They're very distinctive. Though they're products, as I've tried to explain, they're wonderful things, and decoratively they are outstanding, absolutely incredible things. There's a lot to look at, and when you compare them with the other framed wall items on the market, though they are a product for mass market tourism, I think they are well ahead of the pack. In Florence in 1900, there probably were 3,000 artists just making these things, and other sort of Florentine bits and pieces. They would have been making wooden boxes, mirrors, cameos, phony sort of plaster relics. They would have been making marble or alabaster urns and busts. They would have been making inlaid trinkets and bits and pieces, clock cases, all sorts of stuff. So there were a lot of artisans in Florence, and still are now. Though a lot of the stuff in Florence now is Chinese, and it's a really interesting time for Florence, sort of a heyday, not in the creation of the art, but in the marketing of the art. And of course, this art is backed up by the Christian faith, and the visitors to Florence didn't only want to buy a memento, they felt obliged to dip into the Catholic faith and bring back home to wherever they were from some authentic Catholic faith, whether the tourists were from England or from France or other parts of Italy. These were quite widespread. It's sort of a Camino item. It's not a Camino item, but it's sort of a customary Camino item. And there was a time in England where these were quite common. As I say, there's not that many now. So I hope that's been interesting. We've got the Fra Angelico pair. I rate these for the future as being good things to put money into. Thank you.